6 years ago, an amazing, beautiful, powerful woman who spoke 5 languages, who flew airplanes, she was a pilot, who lived abroad, who was a teacher, a mother, and an amazing wife. No one like her in this world. That's not how she was seen. She was a black woman, and she did not get the care that she deserved because of the color of her skin. We live in a world where systemic racism exists in medicine. And it exists here at the place where my children have been born and where many of your children have been born. It must stop. So today we are filing a civil rights case against Cedars Sinai because the evidence in the medical malpractice wrongful death case that we will be trying next week in downtown Los Angeles has shown testimony of the witnesses, of the employees at Cedars Sinai, has established this racism in medicine and has given us what we need to prove, based on their testimony, their literature, their evidence, that Kyra died because she's black. Women of color don't get the same treatment as white women. That's a fact, and we're not doing enough about it. So this civil rights case filed under what's called, it's an UNRUH cause of action, UNRUH, allows lawsuits against businesses, and this is a business that is making probably billions of dollars a year. The business of medicine is something that you can sue and make a civil rights claim against if you have the facts and the evidence. We have those facts. We have that evidence. And we look forward to you all learning more. I'm very proud to be here with a longtime friend and my wife and my friends here. Thank you.
It's especially heartbreaking to learn through the evidence and testimony that has come out during the medical malpractice case about the disparity of treatment for women of color at Cedars Sinai, especially coming from someone. I had 3 babies here at Cedars, but I entered those doors as an affluent white woman, which apparently, and what we have learned, granted me a higher level of care and of safety. This is Charles Johnson.
First and foremost, let me say thank you. Thank you to my friends, my fellow allies, my fellow advocates, my amazing legal team that believed, like our family did, that Kyra deserved so much better. And I'm so grateful to all of you all who are here with us standing in solidarity. This Sunday, mothers all over our country and all over the world will celebrate Mother's Day. Kyra will not be here to celebrate Mother's Day with her sons for the 6th consecutive year because Cedars Sinai failed her. They failed her. I trusted this place with the thing in my life that was most precious. I trusted Cedars Sinai to care for my wife, to protect my son, to care for my wife at her most vulnerable. As I stand here today, knowing without a shadow of a doubt, because of the things that we have learned through this incredibly painful process, there's no doubt in my mind that my wife would be here today and be here Sunday celebrating Mother's Day with her boys if she was a Caucasian woman. The hard facts that we have uncovered speak directly to the point that there is a culture of racism that is rampant at Cedars Sinai Medical Center. And the reality is that on April 12th of 2016, when we walked into Cedars Sinai Hospital for what we expected to be the happiest day of our lives, the greatest risk factor that Kyra Dixon Johnson faced was racism. Over the next couple of days and the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear from families who have experienced tragic situations. You're going to hear directly from employees who have experienced and have been victimized by this culture of racism. But what I want everybody to understand, I want to be perfectly clear, that what we are standing here in solidarity for today is about so much more than just Kyra. It's about so much more than just our family. It is about sending a loud, definitive message that institutions like Cedars Sinai Medical can no longer prey on black and brown families without consequence. My hope is that by filing this lawsuit and by making the public understand the manner in which Kyra's civil rights were neglected, denied, and ultimately resulted in her death, that institutions will step up to the table and step up to the plate in significant ways and make substantial institutional changes to protect mothers and women of color. And for that matter, all people, because the reality of the situation in the United States, it should be a fundamental human right for a mother to walk into a hospital like Cedars Sinai and walk out to raise her children. That should be the bare minimum. And that's what we're here to stand and fight for. So I want to be clear that I've been asked the question oftentimes. I've been fighting this fight for 6 years. And people often ask me, when is enough going to be enough? When will I be satisfied? That answer has two parts. One, first and foremost, is that I will not be satisfied until every single mother in the United States receives the dignified, safe birthing experience that she deserves, firstly. And the second way I want to address that question is this. The reality of the situation is that Cedars Sinai is lucky that they have to deal with me, and that something did not happen to Kyra, because if something had happened to Kyra and she was the one left to fight, she would take this place apart brick by brick and would not stop until every single person across the world understood the truth. Thank you.
My name is Chris Dolan. I'm the attorney who has the honor of representing Mr. Johnson and his two sons in the legal action brought against Cedars Sinai. This is a piece of paper. This is what will make a difference, because they did not take into account their rights, their obligations to treat all people equally. This lawsuit is brought under a law that was passed in 1957 to gain access equally to businesses and services despite race, national origin, and any other discriminatory characteristic. And here we are, 57 years later, saying you have to change, you have to follow the law. Black people have the same rights as white people do. And we're still banging on that door. And so what we're using is a lawsuit to bang on that door. And it's especially appropriate today because if you think about what the Supreme Court is going to do with a piece of paper, it is going to consign women to have to bear children. And for black women, that means bearing children into a system where they are 3 times more likely to die than a white woman. So you are sentencing people to a death, to a life that they don't wish to have, a life that can cause them health consequences. So with that paper that's coming, this paper is coming today. And there's some very important things in this paper. This is not something that's being brought because something is believed to have happened. Within this complaint are quotes directly from employees of the hospital, including Dr. Kimberly Gregory, the director of the Division of Maternal Fetal Medicine and the vice chair of Women's Health Care Quality and Performance Improvement, who testified under oath. Racial and ethnic disparities exist in both perinatal outcomes and healthcare quality here at Sinai. So Cedars Sinai's own people inside, who are charged with making sure that healthcare is provided equally, are saying it is not happening. There is testimony from a technician who was right there when Kara died. And that technician said that women of color are treated differently. I see the black patients come in. I say an extra prayer, because you do have racism, very much so, in the operating room here at Cedars Sinai. This is Cedars' own people indicting Cedars for their failures. So as this lawsuit proceeds forward, more will be exposed. And hopefully what it'll do is send a message to other hospitals and healthcare facilities that if you discriminate on the basis of someone's color, we're coming after you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan White with the Birth Equity Advocacy Project. We at the Birth Equity Advocacy Project are dedicated to the belief and the idea that institutions are made by men and can be changed by women. And we are here to be about the task that's been put before us. Racism is perpetuated in two different forms, by individuals and by institutions. And the Johnson family experienced both. When we know the actions of an individual is based on racism, we will always have to look at the institutions that they exist in. And an even closer look at the consequences institutionalized racism has caused because the racist individuals within them were able to flourish. We are here to stand with Charles and his family. We are here to say not one more and to hopefully never have to say again, she should be here. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Susan Perez, and I'm here today to represent Dr. Joya Career Perry. On behalf of the National Birth Equity Collaborative, I want to offer our sincerest condolences to Kira Johnson and those that loved and knew her. We commend and admire the strength of Kira's family, who have been fearless champions for equitable maternal care. As one of the leading experts and an advocate for change in the Black maternal and infant mortality crisis, we are calling for a culture of respectful maternity care to address this crisis. Our goal at the National Birth Equity Collaborative is to promote birth equity so that Black mamas, babies, and their villages can thrive. When families are preparing to bring a life into this world, they should be able to prepare without fear of losing their lives in the process. Black birthing people and their families deserve to receive care that makes them feel safe, heard, and respected. This is an opportunity to send a clear message that Black women and birthing people matter. And it is on all of us to make sure that providers and healthcare entities treat our communities with the respect and high quality care that they deserve. Solving the ongoing Black maternal health crisis will require buy-in from all facets of the healthcare industry, including and especially large hospital systems, to address the hundreds years of systemic racism, which is the root and cause of this crisis. Thank you.
My name is Carmen Balber. I'm the Executive Director of Consumer Watchdog, and we're really pleased to be here with you, supporting you today, Charles. What happened to the Johnson family in this hospital was a tragedy. It was an outrage, but honestly, it wasn't a surprise. Because we live in a country where medical negligence is the third leading cause of death, where hundreds of thousands of people die and millions more are injured because of preventable medical mistakes, and in a world where all of those problems fall harder on communities of color. Black women are 3 times more likely to die than white women in the country, but 4 to 6 times more likely to die in childbirth in California than Caucasian women. And that's simply an outrage. People of color, not only in the maternal world, but in the rest of the healthcare system, are receiving worse healthcare, experiencing worse healthcare outcomes, and experiencing more medical negligence in a system that is set up to reward quantity, not quality, speed and not success. And so when we have a hospital like Cedars that doesn't address those problems of their own volition, it takes a family like Charles and attorneys like these to hold them to account in the courts. I don't believe anyone told all of the details of what happened to Kira, and I'm sure Charles will have more to say about it, but I want to point out that after their son was born, he was healthy, but Charles noticed that there was blood in Kira's catheter, and he started raising questions with the medical staff, and they told him we'll look into it. And for 10 hours, as Kira's condition got worse and worse, his family kept asking for help and they were ignored. And that is a story that I have heard too many times from families of color who told us that they feel that the poor health care that they received was in part due to the color of their skin. You can see in the hours that Kira's family's pleas were ignored, the racism behind that dismissal. So we're so pleased to stand here in support of Charles, demanding accountability from Cedars so they will change their practices, address systemic racism, so they will change their practices, address systemic racism, and make healthcare safer for all Californians. Thank you.
So, I'm going to go back and tell the rest of it.
Yeah, I've got a couple things.
So, my good friend Jamie brought it to my attention that I really didn't share the details of exactly what happened to Kira. So briefly, I want to share with you all that on April 12th of 2016, we walked into Cedars Sinai for what we expected to be the happiest day of our lives. Kira was here for what was supposed to be a routine scheduled C-section at our obstetrician's recommendation. Our son Langston was born perfectly healthy. Our delivery took place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. After that, we were taken back to recovery. While we were in recovery, as Carmen mentioned, I noticed blood in Kira's catheter, okay? And this is around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I brought it to the attention of the doctors and the nurses at Cedars. At this time, they came in, they examined Kira, they checked her vital signs, and they also ordered a CT scan that was supposed to be performed stat. And by stat, I believe that to be immediately. So at this time, I was extremely concerned, but I'm thinking that my wife is healthy, my baby is healthy, and we're at what's supposed to be this great hospital. 5 o'clock came, no CT scan. 6 o'clock came, no CT scan, and I'm continuing to ask, please, what's going on? Where was the CT scan? It was supposed to be performed immediately. And we were told that, oh, it's coming, it's coming. Now, 7 o'clock came. By 7 o'clock, Kira is shivering uncontrollably because she's losing so much blood. And it's important to note that if you look at Kira's medical records, at 6:45, she was classified a surgical emergency. At 6:45, she was classified a surgical emergency, but she's still suffering with her condition continuing to deteriorate while we continue to beg for the staff just to do something. 8 o'clock comes. Kira's still there suffering in immense pain. And I'm continuing to ask, our family is continuing to advocate. Nothing is happening. 9 o'clock comes. Nothing. They still haven't taken her back for surgery. We're still asking, pleading for the staff to just do something, to just see her, to just prioritize our concerns. And our begs and our pleas are falling on deaf ears. And around 9 o'clock, a nurse came in to change Kira's IV fluids. And instinctually, I just pulled her to the side and I held both of her hands. And I asked her simply, please, can you help us? Can you help us? My wife isn't doing well. They said that they might take her back for surgery. Nobody's come. They said 5 hours ago that they would take her back from a CT scan. That CT scan hasn't taken place. Please, can you help us? At which point she snatched her hands away from me and she said words to me that still haunt me to this very day. She said, "Sir, your wife just isn't a priority right now. Your wife just isn't a priority." Which is indicative of the way that racism was manifesting itself at this hospital. 10 o'clock comes, Kyra's still there suffering. Condition is continuing to deteriorate. 11 o'clock comes, I'm still begging, pleading, asking them to do something. It wasn't until after midnight, 12:30 a.m. the following morning, the morning of April 13th, that they finally made the decision to take Kyra back to surgery. After allowing my wife to bleed and suffer needlessly, while my family and myself begged and pleaded for them to simply just treat her with dignity and respect. 12:30 a.m. they wheel her back into the operating room. As I walk down that corridor next to Kyra is saying words to me that in all the years that I've known her, I don't recall her saying. And she said to me, "Baby, I'm scared. I'm scared." And as a husband and as a father, I did the only thing I knew to do, and that was just to tell her that everything was going to be okay. And we finally got to a point in this walk and where we got to the doors of the operating room, and they opened and they closed behind Kyra. And when those doors to that operating room closed behind her, that was the last time I saw my wife alive. When they took her back into the operating room and the doctor opened her up, there were 3 liters of blood in Kyra's abdomen from where she was allowed to suffer needlessly. And they worked on her for some time, but they were unable to save her. And so I'll say today, and like I've said many times before, when we walked into this hospital on April 12th of 2016, the thought that my wife would not walk out to raise her 2 boys, it never crossed my mind. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, I began to hear stories of other women who had had horrific birthing experiences. And I began to do the research for myself, and that's when I understood that we are in the midst of a maternal mortality crisis in this country that is shameful. It's shameful. The fact that right here in the United States, it is not only the most dangerous, but is the most expensive country in the world to give birth in. But what's even more devastating than that is the fact that, as all of these people have shared with you today, that African American women are 5 times as likely to die in childbirth than their Caucasian counterparts. And so, as if that wasn't hard enough, as if it hasn't been difficult enough for us to try and put the pieces back together, knowing that Kyra was robbed of a life that was full of so much beauty and so much promise. As we've gone through this process, we've heard more and more troubling things. We've had whistleblowers come forward and tell graphic details about how Kyra was denied the treatment that she deserved. We've had former employees come forward and talk about this culture of racism. And so for me, enough is enough. Enough is enough. And we're here standing in solidarity to make sure that not only this does not continue to happen at Cedars Sinai, but that Kyra's legacy will be that this is no longer allowed to happen anyplace. And so very importantly, on this journey, I've had the opportunity, and I won't say good fortune, but the opportunity to meet other families that have faced these challenges. And it's important to me. I'm grateful to my friend Xavier DeLeon and his mother-in-law, Tracy Dominguez, who have come here today to stand in solidarity and show support. And I would like for them just to take a moment, because every time I have an opportunity to share Kyra's story, it's important that I uplift the stories of other families, because this is not just about our family, but it's important for me to let them have an opportunity to share their story about what happened to their angels. Please, if you would.
Before we do that, I have something to say about it.
Okay, Nick is going to say something real quick.
One thing that's really important for this country to know is that this was a repeat C-section, and it wasn't an emergency C-section. So that means they had to go in, evaluate the scar, and be more careful, take more precautions. The surgery, start to finish, took 17 minutes. 17 minutes. And then, the surgical team, they sent her off to recover. 17 minutes. Every physician, every nurse whose deposition we've taken who've said 17 minutes. Have you ever seen a surgery done that fast? No. None of them have. And most recently, we found a nurse. We found a nurse who testified that what they do at the labor and delivery department here at Cedars Sinai is that if it looks like a patient is going to die, that the patient is transferred to the ICU. So the death toll counts against the ICU and not the OB department. That was shocking, mind-blowing, but it's sworn testimony from a credible witness who was a Cedars Sinai employee. We're doing this to effectuate change and to make sure that this does not happen to more women of color. They can all make the choice right now, today, to effectuate that change, but it has to come within. It has to come within. The Dominguez family, their story and what happened is heartbreaking. You should hear it. They're not the only ones. You know, in California, back in 1975, a law was passed that capped the value of human life and quality of life damages. So every child, every infant, stay-at-home mother, retiree, school teachers, if they are killed as a result of medical negligence in 1975, there was a one-size-fits-all cap set on the value of their life of $250,000. We just got that law changed, but it doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2023. So these families, the value of their loved ones in California, this great progressive state, is capped at $250,000. It's a shame. But by telling their stories and bringing their cases forward, they hope to effectuate change. This isn't about the money. It's about making sure that these things stop happening.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Xavier De Leon, and I'm an advocate with Consumer Watchdogs. Like they had mentioned, I am also a victim of medical negligence. I actually lost my fiance and my. A little closer. I also lost my fiance and my newborn son due to medical negligence. My son only lived 18 hours before I had to make the difficult decision to pull the plug. And no parent or family member should ever have to make that choice. So I'd just like to thank you for letting me share my story. I know I kept it short, but I'm just here in support for Charles.
Hello, I'm Tracy Dominguez. I'm Demi's mom and Malachi's grandma. Demi was 23 years old, and she lost her life to medical negligence and her sons. No one valued her. They dismissed her concerns, and she didn't know she could die. She left the hospital with no diagnosis. No doctor ever seen her, touched her, or went into the room to see her. Same thing happened the next day. No diagnosis, no nothing. She went home and had a seizure and passed away in Xavier's arms. And 18 hours later, he lost Malachi in his arms. I tell my story so that other families can understand that bringing awareness is so important through our pain and suffering and our grief every day. It never leaves us. We will fight forever. Her story will continue. I just don't want another family to have to go through this. No family should have to go through. You go to a doctor, you go to a hospital, and you expect to get care. That's what we're told, to trust the doctors. But they failed my daughter. They dismissed her. She was unvalued. But that's our story, and, you know, I just thank everybody for giving us the opportunity to tell our story, and her legacy will live on, and I'll continue fighting for mothers and babies, especially in my community, Bakersfield. We have quite a high value of mothers that have lost their life. So I will continue fighting forever. Thank you.
correct.
Completely different.
No. Thank you. No, this is a separate lawsuit. And actually, this is why I asked Chris Dolan to get involved, because he's the best there is when it comes to handling civil rights cases like this. I do a lot of medical negligence cases, so I'm in. We're going to do this together, but I'm going to let Chris speak to that.
A medical negligence action was brought. During that process, discovery of these horrific facts came to light. Testimony from employees, doctors, people in that room that there was systemic racism that was affecting the care and led to Kara's death was taken. When that shocking information came out, we decided that we were going to bring a separate and different type of lawsuit. One that is based upon the denial of the equal access to health care based upon race. It's a civil rights action. And as part of that action, we're seeking an injunction to change the policies, to make sure that the hospital acts appropriately, and to make sure that women of color who walk in here to have babies walk out with those babies. So this is a separate legal action focused on the hospital's conduct, where the other was focused on the doctor's conduct. That's Mr. Rowley's handling that case.
No, sure. It's just going to trial.
Right now, it's going to trial next week. Finally, after so many years, discussions have started to, after these recent depositions, now they want to talk. So we'll listen, but what we care about most is effectuating the change. So that's what we want to hear about. That's what we want to hear from them. No.
Thank you. So, for me, I was so inundated and overwhelmed with a brand new baby, a wife whose situation is deteriorating, but it was in shortly after she passed and in the hours of the early morning of the next day, because whistleblowers began coming forward as early as the next day, sharing details with us that I was unaware of, right? And so for me, that's a tough pill to swallow, to think about the fact that my wife would be here with her boys if it wasn't for the color of her skin, right? And so as facts begin to come forward, right, and as I begin to relive what happened, right, because I was being told that, yeah, it's coming, and this pattern of delay, dismissal, and denial took place for 10 hours, right? And so we also have to be cognizant of not only the way racism manifests itself in maternal health care, but health care across the board, right? And the fact that we hear from families, as Carmen mentioned, and it's like Groundhog's Day. It is, I expressed my concerns, particularly families of color, black families in particular. I expressed my concerns. My concerns were delayed, they were dismissed, and by the time they did something, it was too late. Kira's story is not unique in that capacity, and I hope that that answers your question. Yeah.
First of all, what did the whistleblowers tell you right after that led you to support the idea that your wife was not a priority, as you said before, because of the color of her skin?
Correct. So there were a couple of things. One, immediately after it was brought to my attention that they saw extreme signs of distress very early on, right? That was one. That was the first thing, right? But the most damning thing, And the most damning evidence about the racial component of Kyra's demise were found in the testimony that was taken in these depositions, which we shared with all of you all. You all can find in the press release. We have videos of that testimony of these former Cedars employees that was taken under oath, right, where they testify to what was going on in the operating room when Kyra was in her last moments. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's through the medical negligence case. We didn't have a basis to bring the lawsuit that we have now filed. We didn't have the evidence. What we knew is Kyra died, and we knew that she bled to death for over 10 hours, deteriorating. That she was ignored. That tests that were ordered weren't performed. That they start giving her blood transfusions, but they don't take her back to surgery. So we look and say, why? When Charles reached out to me the first time, he was representing himself. And it's like, this happened, he told me, he goes, because my wife was black. And I told him, I said, I agree with you. I know the statistics, Charles, but we can't prove that. We can't prove that. Well, we can prove that now because courageous people came forward and told the truth. The nurse who's testified that they ship patients to the ICU so the deaths don't count towards the toll of the OB/GYN and labor and delivery ward. She also told us something else. She said that she was there taking care of Kyra, and when she left, when there was a shift change, Kyra was supposed to go back to surgery. And she came back the next day and Kyra was dead because she was never taken back to surgery during the time frame that she should have. This nurse testified that she was asked to change her records. That's fraud. To make things look better. She was asked to change records and she said no, and she wouldn't do it. She died in the OR. She died in the OR at 2:22 a.m. When there were signs of bleeding 12 hours before. And your question was, how did he come to know that? Charles knew this in his gut and his heart because he experienced it, but being able to prove it was something else. Now we can prove it, and with this lawsuit, we are going to do some digging. And we're going to find more. What we have right now is enough to win, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. That's what we believe.
Listen, we have
a class action is a unique special species of the law where you have to have a number of people who suffered a similar type of issue and who've been harmed similarly. So we'll see what the statistics show. We'll see whether that supports a cause, but just like this case was built out of the facts that came from the wreckage of the malpractice case, that may evolve as we get more facts as to the statistics on this case.
And what was the source of her bleeding? And 3 liters is like what, 3/4 of the blood that a person has?
Talk about that, please, man.
3 liters for an average person. Kyra weighed less than 100 pounds. She was petite. She was little. It was close to 90% of her blood volume that was lost. And that's something that they found when they went back in.
What was it that was the source of bleeding? Talk about that.
A 17-minute surgery.
Was it organ? Was it vital organ picked? I thought I read somewhere that her bladder was...
Yeah, there were lacerations. She wasn't sutured up correctly. You can't do a repeat C-section the right way in 17 minutes. This was sloppy. It was butchery is what it was. There's no justification for a 17-minute repeat C-section. It shocked everybody that we deposed, all the healthcare providers, even the head of OB here, the head of labor and delivery. He looked at it and said, no, I've never seen one done that fast. And that was done by Dr. Naeem.
Can I? That's good. Kind of add to what Nick was saying. Everybody that has looked at Kira's records and assessed the timeline has said to our family that what happened to Kira here at Cedars Sinai Medical was not a medical tragedy, it was a medical catastrophe. And that everything that could have went wrong and everyone that could have failed Kira failed her.
So some of you may remember her in the press that in 2013 there was a young black girl by the name of Jahai McMath. She was someone that I represented when they let her bleed to death at Children's Hospital Oakland. So this is not something new. This is not something that is out of the ordinary. This is something that's happening every day in America. Black women are dying because of their skin. We have some materials for folks, copies of the complaint. There's some multimedia flash drives that have the actual deposition testimony so that you can incorporate those into your piece if you'd like. Thank you all very much for coming.